I will talk more about that when I've got some screenshots that I'm going to go through here to show you a little bit of the UI. It's not a perfect storyboard, if you will, but it's enough of a teaser, I think, to get some of you guys interested in getting into that early preview. Let's see here. UI bug fixes and improvements. I know I said UX fixes and bug fixes, but the dev team did a nice job of outlining these here in the engineering preview. They didn't do a demo of all the things they fixed. They just gave me a summary. So I thought I would throw this up here for you guys. Little things. Obviously they're touching the UX here, UX experience. The page container for the edit schedules. They added shadows to it because it wasn't consistent with the rest of the look and feel. They changed the page container width from 1300 pixels to 900 pixels to work better with mixed screen resolutions or scheduled reports. The default number of rows in the table was 25 before they moved it up to 50. We found that a lot of customers were immediately going in and expanding that. So why not set it to a higher default? Fixed external recipients. Oops, looks like I messed something up on my screenshot there. But there was no space between the words external and recipients in the prior UI. They aligned the recipients column name to the right. They set up tooltips for the status icon, so you could see whether it was enabled or disabled. You understood what those various icons meant. Customer management, the UID, that's the 36 character string that relates to the customer container, was truncated. No matter whether you had the column wide enough or not to fit the full length, they truncated it. You got 3 dots afterwards. So they fixed that. Let's see, dashboards, updated backup chart status. So they updated the legend from icons to blocks, and the totals were changed from a percentage to a number, so that it was a little bit more user friendly. Trying to figure out what was going on inside of your environment. Other tooltips, they increased the text size to 11 points in customer management and inside of scheduled reports to make those more visible, especially if you're dealing with those on a 4K monitor. Common thing, or sorry, some very simple things here, but it kept this one team fairly busy, over the holidays with the additional time they had off. And it's nice to see them touching these kind of things. You'll notice if you're using the beta UI that you should have a submit feedback option in the upper right-hand corner of your backup.management UI. If you have UX related items, things that you see that you like or don't like inside of the UI, feel free to click that link and make those comments directly in the response there. That does go to the UX and the development team. They'll look at that, they'll analyze it, they'll look at the Google Analytics and see if there is improvement that they can make. If you don't have access to that button in the upper right-hand corner, it could be based on your user login, or your account may not be enabled for it for some reason. Feel free to open up a support ticket. Let us know what you do or do not like inside of the UX. They are actively looking at it, working to improve it on a monthly basis, okay? Let's see, updated user views. On partner moves and partner deletes, there were some situations where you moved a partner around, you reorganized your tenant structure, or you deleted a partner even. If you had email views set up that were linked to that partner, had that partner as a fixed variable inside of it, it could cause some problems. It could build or could create a view that was corrupted or damaged, something you couldn't open anymore. So we've made some improvements there. Now, if you delete a partner that it causes a view corruption or view damage, that we're either not going to load the view for you, so that you can not get locked into that circular cycle of having a corrupted view, and we have the ability to go in and delete it or edit or tweak it to get it back usable inside of your dashboard. Let's see, custom columns issues. This is still a work in progress, but we did have some customers report they were using custom columns and they were getting some old data sets sometimes when they did refreshes. So they would go in, edit or update a custom column. Maybe they had a ticket in there or an archive value or something to use to identify or work with that particular device. They'd update the column, they do a refresh of the console, and they would get old data back. So they made some changes to that one now to help prevent that from happening. It does now reload or update that versus pulling cached information. There's still a little bit more work inside of the database they need to do on this one, which will probably come out in the 23.2 release. But this should suffice the immediate issue that customers have reported. For those of you that don't know about custom columns are the way for you to create free-form entry columns in the backup.management dashboard. It allows you to go in and say put a ticket number in or some reference information for a particular device. Let's say that you have decommissioned a device or getting ready to decommission a device, but you need to keep it for another 6 months due to regulatory compliance. You could drop in some information there, such as keep until this date in that field as like I said, free form text, and then you can use that for reference purposes, and you know exactly when to purge and delete that out of your console later. Just one of many uses there. PRP gateway tenant creation. You guys aren't going to see this issue very often, although I did see this on my end. You're only using one user at a time to come in and create new tenants and new containers. But we ran into a collision here in a very active dashboard when our API system was creating new users based on new trial accounts. Partners were creating new users and tenants based on their login and their access into the console. Somebody was running through and creating new tenants via API. We were seeing some collisions when multiple users at the same time were coming in to do that. They've now made some adjustments there so that we can allow multiple user simultaneous creation, or at least proper queuing of creation. It caused some timeouts here historically. Once again, something you guys probably wouldn't see, but we were seeing more on our end from an API perspective. I hid one security update. I don't want to talk about it just yet until this new release does roll out. It has to do with some various fields and properly escaping variables and custom characters or unique system characters, system properties. But that has been addressed. There was also some additional OpenSSL vulnerabilities that were brought to our attention last month in December, specifically affecting versions of OpenSSL 1.1.k and below or earlier. So we did jump on that and immediately rolled out a update to address that, effectively using that older or that flawed version of OpenSSL. It did allow a bad actor to come in potentially and get access to around 62 arbitrary or random bytes of a buffer based on crashing the OpenSSL library. Been a handful of OpenSSL vulnerabilities that have been announced over the last few months, or I guess even the last few years. We've been pretty good about getting those updated in a timely manner. So continue to watch that one. This latest list of exploits that were identified, though, the scores on those were anywhere from 7.5 to 9.8. Looking at the rankings on those, so very, very high or critical rankings. So we do have a dedicated team looking at just security components inside of data protection. Let's see, restore to Azure. Okay, this was what I think the highlight of this release is going to do for us. It's going to get you guys queued up for the ones that want to get early access or an engineering preview access of our on-demand restore to Azure. So this is going to be added into the recovery dashboard section of your backup.management UI. It's only going to be available for those of you that are using the standalone edition of Cove Data Protection. I don't expect to see this, at least not right away, inside of the RMM, Essential, or Insight integrated dashboards. So if you are utilizing those platforms, but you do want to give this a test, you can throw up a quick trial of the Cove Data Protection edition, the standalone edition, and we can get you signed up so that you can see these features and functions. We could also talk about migration if you like, although as you saw earlier, I do have partners that utilize both the integrated and standalone editions of the backup product. What you're going to see is a new Restore to Azure dashboard in the Recovery Dashboard section. And I'll bring up the console here in a second to kind of show some more of this off. In the Restore to Azure section, this is an on-demand restore as opposed to the current standby image functionality, which is a continuous restore. You would utilize this in a case where you've had a customer fail and you want to pick a particular point in time and restore that directly back to your or your customer's Azure environment. You would deploy a recovery agent into Azure, and they would act as the target to build out this virtual machine, after which you would set up your network and boot the system, adjust your resources, and off you go. You failed over into that environment for whether it be 3 hours, 3 days, or 3 weeks, while you're working on repairing, replacing, or restoring the production environment. The functions configuration structure are going to blend very close with what you see in the normal recovery environment. So here in my lab environment, I've got recovery locations, and you can see I've got my SE demo environment here. I've got self-hosted recovery locations sitting on Hyper-V servers or Windows servers, restoring out to the D volume or a NAS device. Some of these are booting the VMs, creating the VMs, booting them, screenshotting them. Others are just keeping it offline virtual machines. And then I've got 3 recovery agents down here running on Azure configurations. So we can see that. And then you're going to have above this a recovery dashboard. So right now you see there's a standby image dashboard. This is standby image to Hyper-V or standby image to Windows Server. And I've got recovery testing. We're recovering into an enable environment, booting them, screenshotting them, and powering them down as proof of life. So there will be a third entry here, which is going to be restored to Azure or on demand to Azure. And those dashboards are going to give you your different breakouts, your different recovery types, if you will. As we introduce more and more recovery types, we'll start to reorganize and restructure these to keep them consistent. But for this release, you'll end up with 3 of those. The ones that are being engineering preview, you'll see that they're locked, and you also have a notation there is in beta or preview for those features. But just like you can see here in this standby image environment, you can see the device, you can see the customer, the tenant, the last X number of recoveries, the boot status in cases here where we're booting it and screenshotting it, the duration. We come over to the right here, you can see this is a standby image recovery, and then when I am booting it, here's a screenshot of that recovered environment. And these are specifically doing continuous restores. It's always sitting here waiting with the most recent session, ready for you to boot or to fail over to. In this newer offering, let me get back to it, Restore to Azure, this is an on-demand recovery for down systems where you weren't thinking proactive with standby image. So you've had a failure, customers called you, you don't have replacement hardware, you don't have a local Hyper-V, you don't have local or a local data center you can work with. Drop in your Azure credentials and restore back into that Azure environment directly. We've adjusted the column structure over here, some of the pop-up commands, remove the ones that are inappropriate for an Azure environment. Because it's on demand, you're not going to see restore history over time. You're going to see just the most recent restore, the Azure VM name that has been created, the recovery progress, the state of the recovery. Let's see. When you go into details on the recovery agent, you'll see the customer, the Azure tenant, the Azure subscription that you're utilizing. You'll understand things like the Azure VM settings, so what resource group, what the virtual machine name is, the region, the VM size. And the VM size is going to be dynamic based on the region that you pick. You want to go into a standard or a large or an extra small type of configuration. Obviously, you want to choose a configuration that's going to be appropriate for the machine you're restoring. You don't want to bring a 32 CPU system into a 4 CPU system, at least not without knowing it's going to run at a very degraded level of performance. An option to cancel restore is going to be available in here. So if you're in the middle of a restore, you need to cancel it or stop it. You'll have that option. We're not going to pause restores because it is an on-demand restore. So either you're going to interrupt it and maybe start a new one, but no pausing of restores. And then of course there's no delete option here either. So this is always going to be present as the last restored session. It's either in the process of restoring or going to show you when it was last restored for a given device. Here, like I said, self-hosted, we've got multiple Azure environments. We can see the usage of Azure, how much space is available remaining inside of the environment. You can add multiple recovery locations. That means you've got multiple restores happening in Azure. Each time you do that, you're going to pick the region, the configuration. So you can have multiple simultaneous restores happening in there. If you have got a lot of systems, you do control the number of parallel restores as well. So if we're doing 5 parallel restores, you've got 15 systems to restore. It's going to do them 5 at a time. Once one completes, then the next one would queue in. This is, I said, on demand right now. This will be followed up by standby image to Azure. That way we'll be doing the same type of functionality, but continuous restore into Azure, so you've got your standby machines there ready to go in the event of a failure. Right now we're thinking engineering preview will start at the beginning of February. So I'll be recruiting here over the next 2 weeks or so and getting that set up for you guys. And then probably a GA on this one, at least tentatively right now, March GA on direct restore or on-demand restore to Azure.